Welcome to the Incredibly Human podcast. Today we've got Palmer Davis with us. Welcome, Palmer. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kyle.
Palmer works with a nonprofit called Haven House, and that helps men with addiction. And you also have dealt with addiction yourself, and that's something that you've kind of volunteered to talk about. And let's kind of dive into it. Let's start there. Tell us a little bit of your story with addiction.
Sure. So I grew up outside of Jacksonville, Florida. You know, I had good parents and probably had it better than most growing up. But at a young age, I came from a long line of alcoholics and addiction. So I think genetically I was kind of predisposed. And once I got into high school, I started drinking and smoking pot, and I just loved it. I knew that was what I wanted to do for the foreseeable future, and partying and that kind of a thing was just. I really thought it was part of my identity. Like, now that's not to say perhaps I was genetically predisposed to be an alcoholic. Like, the choice was mine. I made a lot of bad choices starting in high school, really, and those were all my choices, and I'm completely responsible for those choices. So high school, I didn't really face any major consequences in high school. I did face consequences. I would say the biggest thing was early on, before the bigger consequences came, was just settling for less than I was capable of, or settling for less than what my heart really wanted in life, you know. And that became a very common, as my addiction got further and further along, I was reaching newer and newer depths, So into college, and actually when I was in college, I got my second DUI, and that was kind of, I say, my first major consequence. It was like the first time I was actually looking at facing jail time, and not having a license for the foreseeable future was going to make my life extremely difficult. I was about to be a senior in college at the time, and my parents were just like done with me, so I didn't have any of their financial support to keep doing what I was doing. So it was I put myself in a really difficult position, and I realized then for the first time that I needed to get some help. So that was my first attempt at getting sober, was when I was 21, 22, and I stayed sober for a little while, but as soon as I kind of got through that difficult part of my life, I went back to the same things, and within no time at all, was out of college with student loans, no license. So I was just basically, I couldn't get that good of a job because I didn't have a means of transportation. So it was, staying in a shack, walking or biking to work, and just worried about not being sober,
Right.
So that's the beginning, I guess.
What drugs did you use?
Really, I started off a pothead, and then alcohol and pot my freshman year in high school. And I played sports, so I was loved soccer, played soccer my entire life, and I stopped smoking pot like my sophomore year in high school, and then throughout the rest of high school. And that's when alcohol, I started drinking. I mean, by the time I was a junior in high school, I was drinking drinking on weekdays, not every day yet, but like a junior in high school with always had a handle under their bed, like that was an obvious sign that I was an alcoholic. And I knew that. I knew from the first time I ever got drunk, I knew something was wrong. I knew that other people don't act like this. Other people don't want it as bad as I do. I realized that from an early age. And my parents had warned me, being my dad's in recovery and my grandfather was in recovery, and so on and so forth. Fortunately, pretty much every member of my family now is sober. But I knew, I was educated. I knew what I was getting into. And then it progressed into, a little bit of cocaine in high school, a little bit of pills, like prescription pills from your parents' cabinet or something like that. And then when I got probably around 1920, like the heavy pain pills were like a big thing and really accessible, and I started dabbling in that, and then that kind of led me down a different road. Alcohol was always in my life. Like I could go without drugs. I always needed alcohol, but at times I would be more towards the pain pills and then heroin as I got further along in that. So the alcohol was a constant, and then bouts on and off pretty much for a decade with painkillers and heroin.
So a little bit of everything almost.
Yeah, everything.
Yeah. Wow. So, I mean, you knew that your family dealt with alcoholism.
Mm-hmm.
Your parents kind of warned you about it, but you still dabbled in it. What do you think was the motivating factors that led you to, as a freshman in high school, to even start?
Well, I guess looking back on it now, I can answer that question with 100% certainty. At the time, I didn't realize, but it was, I wanted to fit in. That's what everybody did. All the cool kids did in high school, So I wanted to be a part of that. I have some social anxiety and stuff like that, and alcohol and drugs, all that was gone. It was easier to talk to girls. It was easier to, I don't want to say make friends, but I just felt funnier and had a bigger personality, and it just kind of fit the mold of the person that I wanted to be. So, I guess looking back on it now, it was fear, and that masked a lot of the fears that I had that I didn't ever really realize I had, and it helped me feel better about myself. It made me feel comfortable about myself and with my surroundings with just a drink or a smoke, whatever.
Right, right. I mean, and that's the very humanistic side of, drugs and alcohol, is it does kind of take away some of those protective shields that we have. It melts away some of that anxiety. You get more comfortable with people. And, I think looking back in high school, that wasn't really my scene at all. But I also kind of get it, because there was a community sense. Mm-hmm. The party scene is it's friendships, it's people bonding and laughing and doing stuff together. And so I understand the draw of it. What do you think? How do we bridge the gap with our young adults and help them, also understand that this can be a very dangerous thing once we fall in love with it?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, because it's unfortunately with, you can, like, I was educated. My parents, I knew what was going on from an early age. And nowadays kids, for the most part know, what the consequences can be if they go down this road. Of course they're young and they're 10-foot and bulletproof and all that stuff. So I know, at least for me, I didn't think, where's this going to put me 5 years from now? Or I was just living in the moment. Unfortunately, getting back to my original point, it's really kind of something that, like, you just have to go through, and I think the biggest thing in terms of the future is making resources readily available. So when people do go down this path, and it's gets to the point where it puts them in a pretty bad place, that they have a healthy way to be able to actually have a solution. So when it comes to, like, just sending people away to jail for all these drug charges and stuff like that, I think there is a better solution.
Yeah, for sure.
It's America. The funds are out there to be able to provide that kind of support and help people when they start going down that path to realize that they can get help. But it's a difficult question to answer, because I really think people, especially at that age, are going to make that choice regardless of what you tell them, and they've got to figure that out on their own.
Right.
I think the best thing we can do is just provide them an outlet for when they do go down that road.
Right, and there's so much stigma and around addiction, and alcoholism, and a lot of this stuff is. A lot of these people who are dealing with it are labeled something. It's spoken about like it's an absolute just a choice. You just need to make the right choice, and then also sometimes the stigma of these people just kind of being lowlifes essentially, and so we label these people something that they're not entirely, and then so there's just not a lot of resources that's given because of those stigmas. Seeing that it's not entirely a choice, that it's a lot of it, kind of like you said, genetics play a role, and your body, your brain releases dopamine as a neurotransmitter that tells you, hey, this is nice. It makes you feel good, like you said, and that's why we get so addicted to it. And it's not just alcoholism and drugs. It's so many of us are addicted to things that don't have this scary label,
Sure.
but like shopping or food or social media.
Absolutely.
I mean, imagine going a whole day without looking at your phone. Almost no one can actually do that. We're addicted to it. So all of us have these addictions. It's the ones that are carrying the most consequence that we're actually, those are the ones that we tend to worry about. So you had multiple DUIs. Looking back, what scares you the most about those?
Looking back, the fact that I could have killed somebody, I have multiple DUIs, but that's not to say I was caught every single time I was driving drunk. I mean, hundreds of times. And some of those I was in really bad shape. I actually had, it's funny you asked that question because I think it was this past weekend, a gentleman came up to Bradley's studio, my girlfriend Bradley, and he was just super intoxicated, didn't know where he was, and Bradley's mom was there. It was me, Bradley, and Bradley's mom, and he was gone, and he's stumbling back to his truck, and I'm like, hey man, let me get you an Uber, and then he started getting combative, like, no, I'm fine, and some explicatives and stuff like that, and I was really torn about this because I took his license plate number and I called the cops. And I was that guy. But being on the other side of it, it was like, God, this guy can really hurt somebody. You know, it was scary to. I was about 30 minutes later, I was on the road and thinking like, I hope this guy isn't on the road or he's gonna hit me head on. So that kind of really brought to my senses like just how dangerous it is to drink and drive. And it's funny. It's not funny. It's so he ended up going into a ditch and was basically vertical. His truck was in a ditch and got arrested and everything like that. But that was just kind of like just real. It became real, like what I had done. And honestly, it kind of felt good to be able to be on the other side of it and make the responsible choice. But gosh, I know I dodged some bullets.
Right. And, that's another thing that we don't talk about a lot with alcoholism too, is when your brain isn't functioning well. So alcohol will block a lot of, it blocks a lot of the analytic thought that we have, the constructive thought. So that's why we, and the same thing happens when we're sleep deprived and everything. We're not able to process like we're supposed to process. That's why a lot of people who, they get in fights at bars, and, there's a lot of people who aren't able to assess the situation properly. And because your brain is, it's not being able to do what it's supposed to be doing. And so when we're intoxicated, all that goes out the window. You think you can do it, and, you think you're fine, you're okay or whatever. And clearly the rest of the world sees that you're not. And that's kind of the danger is, the way the brain is not working properly, essentially. So you made a decision for somebody who couldn't make the decision for himself, essentially. And, that's kind of the other scary aspect of drinking while driving or being intoxicated or on drugs is, we're not making the right decisions. And there's no reason for us to not implement ways to prevent those people from making those decisions. So, you probably did, that guy, he wrecked, but at the same time, what if he wouldn't have went off in a ditch, kind of like you said.
Mm-hmm.
So, so yeah, you dealt with 8 years struggling with sobriety, which means that you're trying to get clean,
Mm-hmm.
in the process. You said you're arrested like 10 times before you're even 30.
Mm-hmm.
I can imagine that makes you feel a certain way about yourself as somebody who wants to be clean, you want to change, but you're unable to. I mean, what did you feel?
Yeah. Yeah, helpless in one word,
Mm-hmm.
just like, this is impossible, It was like kind of a, I couldn't live with alcohol,
Mm-hmm.
and I couldn't live without alcohol,
Mm-hmm.
or drugs, it was both. I say alcohol because that was always a constant, but to be in a state where it feels like there's no hope, and it's helpless, and you feel like you really tried to get sober, and you still couldn't manage to get sober. And then throughout that 8-year span, I mean, several, I say, great attempts at getting sober, but each of those times, I would relapse, as they call it, and it was just more and more disheartening, and it just kept on. I started to think to myself, like, I guess I'm just destined to live a life of misery. I had kind of written myself off, and so yeah, that's a miserable place to be, and my heart really goes out to people who are in that situation. But the great thing about being in that misery is it was a process, because I had to be broken down to a point where I was finally desperate enough to say, okay, I'm putting everything to the side,
Mm-hmm.
all these parts of me that I feel like define me. I had to get to a point where I was just ready to relive life completely.
Mm-hmm.
There was no more room for my own pride and ego
Mm-hmm.
at this point. So that's all part of getting to that place that you need to get to actually, really for the first time, try to get sober. I tried, but
Mm-hmm.
it was all in vain, and so that was all part of the process, and that was. Looking back on it, I'm grateful for that process, because I know that each one of those times that I relapsed, or each, those miserable moments, those rock bottoms, I know that each one of those was necessary to get me to the point where I'm at now, and to get me
Mm-hmm.
to the point where I was able to actually get sober and stay sober. So it's great being on the other side of it.
Right.
It sucks being in the middle of
Right.
it.
So in those years of trying to be sober, you're really you're kind of fighting back and forth. Like
Mm-hmm.
you said, it was kind of almost in vain. There was a part of you that, and I'm speculating, but was there a part of you that just wasn't ready to let it go, didn't want to just yet?
Oh, sure, absolutely. I mean, today, I would tell you, like, if I could drink and drug like a normal person, I would do it, Now, I say that there's a caveat there. Like, this is a complete new way of life, and the foundation of that is being sober. So, but if I were a normal person, let's say, without that past, by all means, I would want to be social and drink and drug and everything like that. But, well, drug,
Right.
smoking pot's
Right.
pretty par for the course nowadays. Yeah, so for me, it really took the people in my life that were enabling me, and my parents were never big enablers. Like, my parents made me, work a job in high school, even though I played sports full time, and they helped me through college for a little while. But they, I didn't have mommy or daddy's credit card or anything like that, which, 95% of 99% of kids don't.
Mm-hmm.
But my parents enabled me in other ways. Like if something went down, my parents were always there to bail me out.
Mm-hmm.
If I couldn't make rent, my parents were there to bail me out. So things like that. And it wasn't until they finally said, like, we're not going to bail you out of one more situation. We're not going to pay for one more rent. It wasn't until then where I absolutely had no other option that I was willing.
No safety nets.
Yeah.
So, addiction can definitely change you too. One of my favorite books is actually A Beautiful Boy by David Sheff. I don't know if you've read that or seen the movie, but what grabs it is the story of how his son basically just, his character changes a lot.
Mm-hmm.
He deals with drug addiction, and it's crazy because, he writes and he shows you at one minute what his son looks like, and then another minute what he looks like when he's dealing with addiction. Did you feel like your character changed?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. My mom used to say, like, you were such an angel growing up, and, like, you were such a good kid. And my behavior, I would say, started to change in, like, middle school. Just kind of that impulsive behavior that adolescents go through, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But you could really see, like, Palmer might end up being a little crazy.
Yeah.
And then it manifested itself with drugs and alcohol once I got to high school. But yeah, it's totally a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde,
Mm-hmm.
I can remember waking up in the mornings just like, I cannot believe I did that. That is so against me. I would never do something like that sober. So absolutely, it changed the person I was. And then, the scary thing in addiction, and this is something that my dad told me, the further you get along in addiction, the worst things that you're capable of doing. And I started to almost get to this point. Well, not almost. I got to this point where I was an angry person when I was drunk or high.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you can do some really bad stuff and some scary stuff.
Right.
So absolutely, it changed who I was. I was two different people.
How much has guilt kind of played a role that surrounded your addiction?
It did. Absolutely, guilt and shame and remorse. My relationship with God has really helped me with that. And from the first time I tried to get sober, I was doing the thing like going to AA meetings and had a sponsor and really, I was trying to get sober. And I learned a lot then about, I grew up in the church, but I really never had a relationship with God until I turned 21, 22 and first tried to get sober. A lot was revealed to me, like who God was. Once I finally did get sober, I realized that God, that everybody around me had forgiven me, and the way that I was really able to reconcile my past and all the things that I've done was that it was every single thing that happened was necessary to get me to where I was, to where I was willing to get sober and be completely broken so I could actually get it. So, I've accepted all of my past because I know without it I wouldn't be who I am today,
Mm-hmm.
So, and I've seen other stories like that, people who, and I'd be so quick to like forgive somebody else for that if they've indeed turned it around, So why not be willing to forgive myself? So,
Right.
Just acceptance for accepting the past, knowing that without it I wouldn't be who I am today.
Right. My wife and I both have some friends and family who've suffered from addiction, and we've experienced and seen from the outside what it looks like. Not necessarily experience what you've gone through, but the story is very similar to what you're saying. It's a lot of there's frustration because we hurt for you, essentially, and what you're going through, and we don't want you to go through that anymore. So it's very difficult. There's a lot of impatience. There's a lot of frustration. There's a lot of anger. There's a lot of wanting to just shake this person and say, like, hey, you don't need this. Let it go. But then at the same time, there's a balance of kind of how you said with your parents of allowing them to go through it, making sure that they still feel loved. I'm still here to support you, but also I have to let you go almost into a dangerous realm of, hitting rock bottom. And what is the cost of that? Do you let your loved one, your friend, your child go as far as they can go before they eventually are like, I can't do this anymore. I've got to get out of it. And what's the consequences? Addiction will do terrible things to you, to your brain, and to your really to your body. And then that's not to even say the links of what we'll go through to get high or to be able to drink. What steps we'll take. So it's hard from on the outside to watch people go through it, because you want the shortcut, you want the quick response. You don't want them to go through all these things and hurt other people, hurt themselves, whatever cost. You want the fast track, but the fast track doesn't always exist, right? It's not always there. And I think that's the other thing of trying to figure out when we're talking, because right now, in America, this is an epidemic. Addiction is an epidemic. How do we allow people to go through this to where, but at the same time, not letting them hurt themselves or hurt other people, and finding constructs that really, really work, but also, challenge you that and let you realize that, hey, how bad is this for you and your friends and your family, but also not riddle you with guilt. Anyways, my point is that it's a lot of things blending together, and that makes it very, very gray. It's not so black and white. It makes it almost kind of like a perfect storm of trying to figure out addiction and get people through it. And what was the thing besides hitting rock bottom that really shifted everything for you and shifted for your story?
Well, I do want to kind of touch on something, and I was going to touch on this earlier, but talking about that gray area, and what parents and what family members have to go through. I can only imagine. I don't have children, but I can only imagine what I put my parents through and how difficult it would be to say, that's it. I'm never going to help you out in any situation ever again. You have to do this on your own. You have to feel the gravity of all these bad decisions that you're making. To be able to do that is, it's got to be very difficult, But with that said, and it almost pains me to say this, because thinking back to the person that I was in my active addiction, like, I always knew I had that lifeline, and saying this, and to the people out there who will hear it, and I work closely with families and addicts, getting them into our program, and I have to have this conversation with a lot of the parents. The best thing you can do for them, as scary as it is to say, no more, not a single thing. I will love you and I will pray for you, but I cannot do this anymore. And it's scary because that might be the last time you ever talk to them, but you're just delaying the inevitable. We're actually hurting them when we enable our loved ones. We're actually hurting them more than we're helping them, because they've always got a means to get they always have a safe zone, safeguard. And so when we say enough is enough, then they have no more options, and if they are going to get it, it will be in that moment, Otherwise, it's just delaying the inevitable, which is one more thing, which is death, And in many cases, it's jails, institutions, or death. So the nut house, jail or prison, or death, and sometimes that's what it ends up, and there's nothing that anybody could have done to make it differently. But I think your chances of that not happening and that person finding sobriety increase when you draw a hard line in the sand.
Right.
Sorry.
So, well, to point to that and the difficulty of making that decision as a friend or family a member or a parent, like in A Beautiful Boy, I think he even raises the question of, if I say no to him, to my son, he's going to go end up on the street, and he's going to essentially live on the street, and he's going to do terrible things for money to get high. Mm-hmm. What are those things? I don't want to know, essentially. I don't want to know what he's doing on the street to get money and to get high. But if he's in my house and he's getting high, at least I know where he's at, and I know he's safe,
Mm-hmm.
And that's the fine line that we're kind of talking about is, I think a lot of parents are like, well, at least they're alive, and I know they're not doing these terrible things,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's hurting other people or hurting their own bodies or selling their bodies or whatever it is. At least I know that they're safe, they're in our home. Yes, they're still using. I think that's the fear that they have when it's turning away your child. And kind of like you said, it's probably one of the hardest decisions to make, but it's also necessary. But I think that's just adding to the conversation of how difficult it is to get clean because of that factor alone. It's just,
Mm-hmm.
do you let these people go to literally the worst, situation, or do you just continue to enable it for the sake of yourself, knowing their situation?
And I'm not saying, it really is a gray area, but I'm definitely not saying that like the first time you ever catch your child drinking alcohol or smoking pot, like to kick them out of the house.
No.
By no means. Like this is when it's really progressed and gotten bad,
Right.
But yeah, so in that process of the first time they ever get caught to, when they find themselves in the grips of addiction, what's the family or friends stance in that process,
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's where it's very important. They have groups like Al-Anon and these support groups that help families and friends that have loved ones in the grips of addiction. And you have other people that you can talk to that have been down that road, who have been through the failures and the successes and everything, and that's what those groups are there for. And I think it's really important for people in those situations to get involved in a support group, and to be able to not just make that decision without any experience or any help. Really.
Right. And to do it really kind of right off the bat, if you start to see a loved one or even yourself kind of going through this and you identify, okay, wait, I have a problem, the sooner you get in there, the quicker. You think that makes a difference?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because your behavior, so as they talk about people in addiction and the loved ones that are around them, we're sick in our addiction, and we can make those around us sick too.
Mm-hmm.
We can, we manipulate them so much that their sanity almost begins to change also,
Mm-hmm.
So the quicker that you can get in a support group or have that open line of communication with people that have been down that road,
Right, yeah.
the more you'll be of service to that person who's going through addiction.
Right. Well, let's dive into Haven House a little bit. So Haven House, right now we're in Florida. We're in kind of the Panhandle region, Destin and Santa Rosa,
Beach,
right,
and,
beach
yeah.
and everything. So Haven House is an addiction and recovery program, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we are a 12-month men's drug and alcohol addiction recovery program, residential. So the guys, we house the guys, we feed the guys, give them transportation, take care of any medical stuff that they have while they're at the Haven House. Anything that they need, any needs that they have are provided for. And it's a very structured program. So they wake up in the mornings, they have to shave, they have to make their bed, their rooms have to be tidy. It's almost like military,
Mm-hmm.
But that kind of structure is needed
Yeah.
to make a real lifestyle change.
Mm-hmm.
So they go to meetings in the morning, and then they work in our thrift stores or at the rehab during the day. And so there's a lot of rehab places out there. And this is not to discredit anything that they do. There's a lot of amazing places out there. But one thing that is kind of unique to our program is the whole work therapy, quote unquote, aspect to it. And to be able to go to your job every single day for a year, which is what you're going to do if you graduate the Haven House.
Right.
And you work a full-time job, not call out, not, be late, not just instilling that kind of consistency in day-to-day life is huge. And then also while you're working, a lot of these character defects and shortcomings come out during work when they're working with others, or maybe you're a person that has social anxiety, and we'll put you up at the register at our busiest store, so that you've got to deal with that sober and struggle through it, but you get through it, and that's just one example, but examples are throughout the program of where you're put in a challenging position, and you have to deal with whatever the fear is. Whatever your defect or shortcoming is, you have to deal with it sober, and maybe you have to deal with it for a month or two until you actually get through to the other side. So that work environment really instills consistency. It allows the guys to learn how to work with other people, rely on other people, and just work out a lot of these kinks that that have become habits in their lives,
right.
And then meetings in the evening and so on and so forth. So
right.
Busy days.
Yeah. So you're giving these guys a lot of structure, but you're also not letting them just sit around and be bored. They're given tasks to do. They're working. They're moving. They're not having a lot of downtime to where they're thinking about other things. Their brains are constantly engaging something or someone. So Haven House is an addiction recovery, but it's a thrift store. It's based off these thrift stores, correct?
Yes. Yeah, so we have 3 thrift stores here on the Emerald Coast and a distribution center. They're in Miramar Beach, Santa Rosa Beach, Panama City Beach, and then our distribution centers in Freeport. And then we also have 2 up in Nashville, outside of Nashville, and we've got a program up there. And essentially these stores, so our program is very affordable. So it's a one-time fee of $3,000 to get into our program. Now that $3,000 covers meals, room and board in a place like Santa Rosa Beach, everything.
Right.
We take the guys deep sea fishing, we take them out to restaurants, take them out to the movies, bowling, all kinds of activities. So for $3,000, you're certainly getting
one of
your
the most
money's worth.
beautiful places in the U.S.
Yeah,
essentially.
Yeah. Sure. This is where people, buy their beach houses
Right.
and vacation and all that kind of a thing. So absolutely. Now, the guys are essentially there's 3. It's $3,000, and we do. A lot of the guys are scholarshiped in, either are partially or fully scholarshiped in. But the guys are essentially paying their own way. The stores, we're in a unique place that the stores alone generate enough revenue to be able to run a magnificent program, It's kind of we're just fortunate. It's really a godsend that it was placed, Haven House was opened up in Santa Rosa Beach back in 1998. And that was before this area really started to blow up. So the property was cheap back then. Everything was cheap back then. And then as we've grown, the area around us has grown. And there really is not a better place to be able to run a thrift store, because we're constantly getting donations from people who they've had their furniture that they spent thousands of dollars on for 2 years, and they're ready to swap it out.
Right.
So they donate it to us. And then on the flip side, there are a lot of rental properties in the area, and people don't want to buy something brand new that might get broken a month from then. So we have the market for the donations and to get rid of those donations. Right. So it's just it's really a godsend how it all worked out. So that's given us the ability to just be completely self-supporting in our thrift stores and make our program affordable like it is, and give the guys a program that they can be proud to be in. You know, Haven House is renowned in the area for doing things the right way, you know, and we don't take shortcuts. And they have brand new washers and dryers and hardwood floors, and all the vans are new, and you know, just stuff like that. Is when you've seen places that kind of try to do the same thing as the Haven House, and you see like some of the worst places, and you see how they're run, and then you see how a place like the Haven House does it. It just we don't take any shortcuts, you know, and I'm grateful to be a part of it.
You know, me and my wife, we actually found the thrift store because we were shopping for stuff, and one of the things we walked away before I even knew the story of what was going on. When we left, it was a matter of, we kind of both said the same thing. It was like, wow, they're really nice there. They're really cool people. And then it kind of made sense that they were working, they're working for something that they believe in. It wasn't just somebody, you know, working a job that, you know, that they are there for the paycheck. They don't really care about the business. They don't care about the staff, you know, the customers or anything. It was, you could tell right off the bat that, you know, it was more than just work. It was something else, you know, it was an identity. It was, anyway, so when we walked away from it, we're like, man, that, you know, they're really nice. They're really cool. The way they just approached people and doing tasks and stuff, it felt different because you're like, this is a thrift store. You don't feel like it should be, you know, it shouldn't run this way, but it was run really well. And then when we learned the story, it was like, okay, you know, we're seeing that it's a business, it's an idea, a nonprofit that is really trying to do something good. So now that you're working in here, what's your specific role with Haven House?
So I am the director of outreach and ministry, and actually the associate pastor at our little chapel that we have. So my job essentially is to reach out to the community, and so we work closely with like the criminal justice system, with Department of Corrections, probation and parole, all those areas. That's a big source of where help is needed, you know, and we identify those areas, and it's my job to try and connect those dots and let the probation officer here, or the judge there, or whatever, know that there is a place like the Haven House, and maybe get a diversionary sentence where they don't have to go to jail. They can come to the Haven House for a year, and as long as they finish the Haven House, they're good, you know, stuff like that. Yeah. So fostering those relationships, and then also just the recovery community as a whole. So there's plenty of rehabs in the area. So having relationships with the detox centers, and we're unique in that we're not an insurance-based place, you know, but we can also provide, minus the whole medical aspect, it is like a luxury place to stay, you know. Now, it doesn't feel that way when you're in the program. Like, there's nothing luxurious about the long days, you know. But they have everything that they need and plenty more. And so a lot of people can't afford these insurance-based places because they don't have insurance, or they don't have $20,000, $30,000 to be able to go to a 30-day residential program. And we're kind of that other option. And so they'll get phone calls all the time from rehabs or people getting out of detox. Hey, I want some help, but I don't know where to get some help. So it's my job again to be able to connect those dots and let those organizations know that we are an option for those kinds of people. And
do y'all have like a high turnover? Do you have like where you have more people needing to come into the program than you can actually handle? Or do you have spots available?
Typically, we have beds available. It has happened a few times in like the past couple of years where we've been at absolute max capacity. But But now that we've actually, in the past couple of years, we've opened up another program in Tennessee, and as we've been able to build that program out, so when we first opened it up, it had room for like 6 guys, but we had this huge building that was attached to it. And that's all been built out, so they can house like up to 18 to 20 guys now. So that's just now getting up and running. So now we have more flexibility. Like if we had to, we could send that person up to Tennessee.
Gotcha.
So, but yeah, we stay busy with the intakes and everything like that. COVID actually slowed down for a lot of nonprofits, which I'm sure you've heard, and for the recovery community as a whole. Rehabs weren't getting as much people coming in because it was a difficult time. The government was providing money for people who were in pretty crappy circumstances. They had lost their job, but along with that, you've got addicts and alcoholics who can then get that government assistance that they normally wouldn't get. And if I'm in the grips of addiction and I've got a steady check coming in, I'm not going to get help until that well is run dry. So it was just a trying time for everybody during COVID.
So what's kind of cool, because I checked out y'all's place, is it looks like a really tight knit community. And I actually talked to somebody who helped deliver some of our furniture, and he said one of the biggest factors for him was the brotherhood. Having these guys that are all going through the same thing together. Y'all share that experience. And it made a huge difference. On top of that, what do you think are some of the biggest factors you see in this program? Or is it just the whole thing?
Well, absolutely, that is the most important. I would say God, or however you want to define your God, spirit of the universe, something greater than yourself. We at the Haven House, we are a faith-based program, and we don't push that on anybody, but we're going to continue doing what we're doing and having our Bible studies in church, and that resource is there to foster that relationship if that's the road you want to choose. But in any case, I think my relationship and those that I'm close to in recovery will all tell you this, your relationship with a higher power, whatever that is first and foremost. You have to get out of yourself and realize that the world, you're not the center of the universe, and it's not about you. So that's first and foremost. And along with that, realizing it's not about you. Oh, well, then maybe it's a lot about everything else that's around me and these other people that are around me too. So with how difficult the program is, with how difficult getting sober is to begin with, and then you throw in all the structure and the long days and everything that goes along with that, and you're doing it with a group of people, it really galvanizes all the guys that are in the program when they're able to go through this together, and it's a fraternity. Not many people get sober, unfortunately. Most people have not, unless they've been in the military, have not been in this kind of a structure before. And so there's almost like a badge of honor that they wear. We can outwork anybody, or and they have in their past been through some really dark places, and I'm not in that dark place anymore. So them being able to go through all of that together, and in their weak moments rely on somebody else who's been exactly where he is and says, hey, you can get through it. I did it. You'll be fine. Having that kind of brotherhood absolutely is a staple of the Haven House and the recovery community as a whole. And for that fact, people that are doing good things as a whole. We're all in this together. We all have to work together to do good in the world. I mean, that's a lot of what Incredibly Human is. Kind of how you stated about a higher power is so much of us being better and growing as people is the absolute belief that and believing in something that's greater than yourself, essentially, but also believing in your community and believing in that we're all human. We're all kind of going through this together. Even though I'm not dealing with addiction like you've dealt with addiction,
I'm still going through life as you're going through life, and that connects us. You know, we're human beings. That's something that we will share. And the more we say that, and the more we tell people about it, and the more we talk about our community, but also talk about, first and foremost, getting past these labels, whether it's addiction or whatever. Start there, and then we won't write off people so much. You know, we're not gonna say that, you know, the Palmers, back, when you're going through all that.
Sure, you can say it.
We're not gonna write off the Palmers of life. You know, we're gonna continue to work on their behalf and grow. I need to grow more by understanding what Palmer's going through. You know, so that's a lot of what, why we're doing these podcasts and talking about it. And you've just, kind of defined kind of that belief by Haven House, a brotherhood of people who have a common belief, but they also share a common thing that they're struggling with. And that helps you go forward, man. That helps you see new horizons. I've read about like AA and kind of the range of effectiveness and the success rate, and it's not always real good. I'm sure you can attest to that. What is the success rate of Haven House? Do you feel like there's guys that come through the program who got to come through it again, or they fall off the horse, or do you feel like y'all have got a pretty good success rate?
Yeah, our success rate is very good relative to other programs. I will say this, and AA, the big book, says the same thing. It says, rarely have we ever seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. And really, they asked Bill, who wrote the book, like, years later, is there anything that you would change about the book? He said, there's one thing, I would change that rarely to never. So it's basically like, here is the format, here's the blueprint. If you do this, and this, honestly, with an open mind, then you'll beat addiction, you know. And the same holds true for our program, you know. That just speaks to the power of that's within each and every one of us, and the power really ultimately that's outside of us that we allow to work within us. So I think we have 100% success rate with people who really want to get sober. Now, I say that, and then I'll say this. You can certainly help people along in that process, you know. For the most part, people are going to get sober when they're ready to get sober, you know. But you can expedite that process. You can improve somebody's chances by going through a place like the Haven House, you know. So our success rate for people who graduate the program is probably about 50-50. For years down the road, you see what they're doing. About 50 to 60% unfortunately aren't still sober, and about 40 to 50% are, you know. So but when you compare that to, you know, the statistics are all out there. You'll hear 2%, you'll hear 5%, 10%. Yeah. For people that actually try something for a year, the most accurate study I've seen from AA is like people that went to meetings for a year, 10% of them stayed sober, and I think that's pretty accurate. So our program, it's about 40-50%. So your chances increase.
Right.
You know?
No, I've read that same statistic that it's, they'll label it between 5 and 50%, which is a very wide range. They said realistically it's most effective around 10%, which isn't very effective, unfortunately. So even if you're hovering around 40%, I would say that's pretty successful, honestly. So you get to see lives kind of being changed for those who actually do have success. What's the reward for you, and kind of what's the fear of your job too?
Yeah, it's very rewarding, and we talked a little bit before this, and it's one reason I was so attracted to doing this podcast with you is I looked at some of your material, and I saw some of your videos, and just the feel good stories and the stories about the human condition and how to just get through life with a difficult hand sometimes, or whatever it may be. You know, all of us are human. We all have our imperfections. We all have our struggles. Really, and one way or another, none are more difficult than the other. We all have our unique challenges,
Right.
you know. So it was very appealing to me to be able to share that with somebody who understands that experience and is trying to who's starting a movement to be able to connect people in the community so that we're all more aware and find the answers to some of these really difficult questions.
Yeah,
It starts with you know, people like you and like the Haven House. But yeah, it is very rewarding. It is the most rewarding thing, more rewarding than any drug or drink that I've had in my life. You know, it's a sustaining thing. You know, it's days from now, weeks from now, years from now, I'll look at how somebody just completely changed their life. I mean, the people that come through the Haven House, they're at the end of the rope. You know, they've been to prison. They're facing prison. They're homeless. They're whatever. You know, all of their family has left them. They're married with 5 kids, and their wife and their kids have want nothing to do with them anymore. You know, these are people that are at the very depths of life, and then you see the change in them, and then you see where they're at when they graduate. And really, maybe, you know, I was about to say, you see where they're at when they graduate, and then a year from now, and they've got a new car, and they're thinking about buying a house, or they bought a house, or starting their own company. But really, it's the little things. You know, when you see a guy that's like got serious anger issues, and you see him not get angry, and then the next time there's a brother around him who's getting angry, and he says, "Hey, man, you don't want to do that. Trust me." And he is then a good example for that person. It's those subtle changes where you really, you know, you get goosebumps in those moments, because you're like, wow, this person is really becoming a new person. And yeah, that is absolutely the most rewarding thing, to just be a part of that, you know. And it's not the staff members, the interns, the residents. Like, we're all in this together. Nobody is more important than the next person, you know. We all have our role to play in the Haven House and society as a whole. We all have our role and our niche in whatever it is that we're doing. So very rewarding.
Right. And, you know, kind of just to speak to what you were saying a little bit, a lot of us take that for granted, you know, because we haven't been down such a dark road. So we take for granted what it actually means to have, to essentially be new. We take for granted what you've just experienced, that you identify as being better than any drink or any drug, that essentially the high of life that you're feeling. All of us are kind of taking that for granted because we're not actively seeking that similar high when it comes to the world around us, or our community, or and I think it's because we haven't experienced something so heavy and so dark that we ache and crave for that other thing. You know, somebody who deals with depression, I've kind of dealt with depression on and off my entire life, which stimulated a lot of this is wanting to find something else that gives me substance, that gives me meaning, that gives me purpose, that goes beyond a lot of the stuff that we just surround ourselves with in life. That's more defining in your story as a person than anything else that you can add, is living that moment. And, you know, it's hard to convey that to people, but I think the more and more we share those stories, and the more and more that we realize that I can have that experience too. And sometimes and you don't even realize it, but sometimes it's just simply accepting somebody else and kind of what they're going through. That acceptance and that tolerance, or even that empathy, can really start to steer you, and we just got to keep working on it and building it. But anyways, no, just kind of what you said, that feeling you got, that reward factor, that's greater than the thing that you thought you needed in your life. You know, that says a lot. So to kind of wrap this up, though, what is your hope for the world when it comes to addiction?
You know, this has been going on for forever, probably, you know. But there were, you know, drunks and the Romans and the Greeks and the Egyptians, and they practiced witchcraft with all these crazy drugs. And like, surely, yeah, drugs and alcohol have been a part of society for thousands of years. But more recently, you look at like the war on drugs in the Reagan administration. You know, the cocaine cowboys and like what it was like in the 60s and 70s and 80s and that whole phenomenon of drugs being introduced into America from these foreign countries. And now it's just escalated on a whole different level with China getting involved with these synthetic things and Mexico and their manufacturing capability. So it's a monster, you know. So how do you stop that? Like, we've tried for years and years and years. I don't know how you stop. I really don't know if there is a solution to it. If there was a solution, then we would have made some progress by now. Right. You know. So, if the solution's not in a military fashion or a law enforcement fashion, DEA fashion, and cracking down on that, then what is the solution? And I think it is. It starts with educating people early on. You know, sure, that helps. You know, but ultimately, I think it is giving people the opportunity that want to get the help, giving those people that opportunity to get the help, and it's a that's like a multiplier, you know, because that one person that gets help is then going to help how many people get help, right. You know. So the more that we can instill this attitude of you can recover, and the more that we can nurture and cultivate a community or facilities or make this accessible to anybody who's looking to get that kind of help, the more that we can do that, the more people that we have that get to the other side of it, and then the more people, again, to be able to spread that word, the message of their experience, strength, and hope to others. So really, it's a, and your show is all about this, you know. It's at the human level. It's at how we can look to the people around us and figure out what their needs are and how we can be of service to them, whatever it is, but in addiction as well. So, right.
Well, here's kind of a twist to that is, without your going through the experience that you went through, which we don't want people to go through, essentially. You don't want kids to grow up thinking alcohol and drugs is life. But without you have gone through that yourself, would you be the Palmer that you are today?
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I'm grateful for it, because I you know, say I wasn't an alcoholic or an addict, I don't think I'd be the same person I am today. I wouldn't be as good of a person as I am today. I wouldn't value my relationship with God as much. I wouldn't want to seek the truths around me and the truths in the universe and the world, and however deep you want to get with it. But I value that kind of stuff, you know. I don't know how much I would value that if I hadn't been through what I've been through, you know, right. And gotten to the other side.
Yeah, so that kind of changes the narrative a little bit, you know. And it's not even so much that we don't want to, you know, we want to prevent people from experiencing that. We do, but we also don't want to take away the lives that are changed and the revelations that you experienced along the way. So it's one of those things that, yeah, it adds so much to the story of you as a person. Mm-hmm. You know, the character of who you are, the things that you went through as a person, what you've experienced. And it excites people at the same time, because it gives them hope. You know, it gives people that are going through the same thing, you know, I want what he has now. I want that reward. I want that feeling, that vision, that belief. So your story is powerful in that, and that's why it's so important to tell those stories, is because we need hope. We need contrast. We need to be able to go from one person to another. We need growth. And so I think, it's almost where, as much as we hate addiction and alcohol and all this stuff, let's use the fact that, like you said, it's not going away. This monster exists. Well, let's find a way to change that story. That it's attacking our youth and people, and people with anxiety and depression, and it makes us feel good. But what if we were to change the story? We gave everybody that moment of shifting the narrative in their own lives.
Yeah. I think this is the case in anything. Life is difficult. We all have our problems, our addictions. But I think if each and every one of us looked at, not so much as at our problems, but our solutions, and not so much what is going on with me as to what's going on outside of me. If there's a lot of deep societal issues, with what's on the TV nowadays,
right.
Which is, again, I'm so grateful that you, Kyle, have started this platform to actually get some good stuff out there. But there's deep-seated societal issues that unfortunately are probably not going to change anytime soon, without something very drastic happening.
Right.
And but why can't we try to make those changes, So, and it starts, you alluded to this before we started, it starts with one person. It's when we don't think we can make a difference that we don't make a difference. But if I can have that shift, and you can have that shift, and we can then influence somebody else to have that shift, then the world becomes a better place, and we're living more so in the solution than the problem, and we're living outside of ourselves and not so self-absorbed. So I just appreciate you for having me on this podcast to be able to share my story. And I hope that somebody hears this and changes, because of something I said. I will say that everything that I have today is because of something I learned from somebody else, So I want to pass that on as much as I possibly can. It's a gift that's been given to me, really. And, I put in a lot of work, but absolutely, this was something that was freely given to me by my higher power and by a lot of people that helped me along in that process. And it's my duty and a privilege to be able to then share that with other people.
Right. Well, my last question is, what do you think it means to be human?
I'm going to say this really short, but to find perfection in your imperfections,
Right.
That's about it.
Yeah, that's great. I really appreciate you being on here. I think we covered a lot of really valuable stuff. It's the same thing, that affirmation that what you're doing is good, know that, believe that. Don't let anybody tell you different. Even if you're in moments of where you feel like, am I doing, is this what I should be doing? Is it not what I should be doing? Or you're kind of having some sort of self-doubt, know that it is good and it's worth it. Whatever you're going through in the moment, it's worth it on the other side. And your story, it obviously says that, to deal with something for so long in your life and to come out on the other side of that, that's powerful stuff. So yeah, I really appreciate you being with us. And quick shout out to your friend Sean, right?
Yeah.
Letting us record in his house. He's a talented photographer. So yeah, we will put some links onto some of his stuff. He's really talented, and we really appreciate him letting us use this space. But thank you for being here.
Yeah. Thanks again, Kyle.